The Philippine Foreign Secretary has ordered that new diplomatic protests be filed against Beijing after Chinese vessels were spotted in the waters claimed by Manila in the South China Sea. Over 150 Chinese vessels are still inside the territorial waters of the Philippines, almost 8 months after they were first spotted, reports added. Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr., who is in the United States for an official visit, issued instructions via Twitter to the Department of Foreign Affairs to file the protests. Locsin said he wanted separate protests filed on China's radio challenges against Philippine maritime patrols, unlawful restriction of Filipino fishermen from Scarborough Shoal, and the continued presence of Chinese ships in the vicinity of Iroquois Reef, some 125 nautical miles off the coast of Palawan. Manila claims Scarborough Shoal, a reef located 118 nautical miles west of the main Philippine island of Luzon, within its exclusive economic zone, reports Manila Standard. The response comes a day after Rep. Rafi Baizan said that 150 Chinese fishing ships had been spotted in the South China Sea. Citing information from the NSC, Baizan said the vessels were engaged in fishing operations, moving from one spot to another in the area. However, Locsin's tweets made no mention of the latest Chinese incursions. This is the latest of the diplomatic protests filed by the Philippines against the presence of Chinese vessels in Manila's exclusive economic zone since March. While bigger groupings were spotted in Chinese-built artificial islands, some were observed near islands occupied by Manila. China had then maintained that these vessels were fishing boats taking shelter from bad weather. But, Beijing has always depended on its fleet of fishing boats and Coast Guard to further its strategic ambitions in the South China Sea. The Philippines had then declared that it would file daily diplomatic protests with Beijing. Though the vessels began leaving by middle April with only a handful of Chinese militia vessels remaining, provocations from the Chinese side continued. Recently, the military's Western Command or Westcom, based in Palawan province, said Philippine aircraft were warned by China while they patrolled the skies above the South China Sea. It said China fired 5 flares between June 16 and 22 at Philippine military aircraft conducting security patrols. Though China claims a monopoly over the South China Sea, citing a 9-dash line, a demarcation that covers almost 80% of the South China Sea, the Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitration has said it was illegal. Over the past several years, the South China Sea has emerged as an arena of US-China strategic competition. China's actions in the South China Sea, including extensive island building and base construction activities at sites that it occupies in the Spratly Islands, as well as actions by its maritime forces to assert China's claims against competing claims by regional neighbors such as the Philippines and Vietnam, have heightened concerns among US observers that China is gaining effective control of the South China Sea, an area of strategic, political, and economic importance to the United States and its allies and partners. Actions by China's maritime forces at the Japan-administered Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea are another concern for U.S. observers. Chinese domination of China's near seas region, meaning the South China Sea and the East China Sea, along with the Yellow Sea, could substantially affect U.S. strategic, political, and economic interests in the Indo-Pacific region and elsewhere.
To unidentified foreign vessel at Sabina Shoal, this is Philippine Coast Guard, BRP Cabra MRRV 4409. You are within Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. You are requested to provide the following: name of vessel, intention, last and next port of call, on channel 16.
Potential general U.S. goals for U.S.-China strategic competition in the South China Sea and the East China Sea include, but are not necessarily limited to, the following: fulfilling U.S. security commitments in the Western Pacific, including treaty commitments to Japan and the Philippines, maintaining and enhancing the U.S.-led security architecture in the Western Pacific, including U.S. security relationships with treaty allies and partner states, maintaining a regional balance of power favorable to the United States and its allies and partners, defending the principle of peaceful resolution of disputes and resisting the emergence of an alternative might, makes, right, approach to international affairs, defending the principle of freedom of the seas, also sometimes called freedom of navigation. Preventing China from becoming a regional hegemon in East Asia and pursuing these goals as part of a larger U.S. strategy for competing strategically and managing relations with China. Potential specific U.S. goals for U.S.-China strategic competition in the South China Sea and the East China Sea include, but are not necessarily limited to, the following: dissuading China from carrying out additional base construction activities in the South China Sea, moving additional military personnel, equipment, and supplies to bases at sites that it occupies in the South China Sea, initiating island building or base construction activities at Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea, declaring straight baselines around land features it claims in the South China Sea, or declaring an Air Defense Identification Zone, or a DIZ, over the South China Sea and encouraging China to reduce or end operations by its maritime forces at the Senkaku Islands and the East China Sea. Halt actions intended to put pressure against Philippine-occupied sites in the Spratly Islands, provide greater access by Philippine fishermen to waters surrounding Scarborough Shoal or in the Spratly Islands, adopt the U.S. Western definition regarding freedom of the seas, and accept and abide by the July 2016 Tribunal Award in the South China Sea arbitration case involving the Philippines and China. The issue for Congress is whether the administration's strategy for competing strategically with China in the South China Sea and the East China Sea is appropriate and correctly resourced, and whether Congress should approve, reject, or modify the strategy, the level of resources for implementing it, or both. Decisions that Congress makes on these issues could substantially affect U.S. strategic, political, and economic interests in the Indo-Pacific region and elsewhere.